Well, Happy New Year. Happy Wednesday to everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this little midweek Bible study. As we remember, we're going through the book of Daniel, and of course, we've had a couple week break because of the holiday. And I thought it might be nice to do a slow transition back to our studies. And what made this so interesting for me is I subscribe to a number of Jewish websites that send out newsletters and things in my email. And one of this is on myjewishlearning.com. And this came during the holiday period, and it really piqued my interest. And of course, you can see the title of it is The Secret Connection Between Hanukkah and the Book of Daniel. Um, Before doing any Jewish studies, I really knew very little about Hanukkah. I just kind of figured it was a Jewish equivalent of Christmas or something like that. I learned much differently as start studying this a little bit. And this article that we're just going to briefly go through um, brings out some things that I thought will help us in our study of Daniel, um, mainly to create a mindset of what was going on with the Jewish people while they were in captivity and the book of Daniel was being written. Obviously, being persecuted is nothing new to the Jewish people. Being carried into captivity happened numerous times throughout the Bible that we read. But the book of Daniel handles it or records it somewhat differently than other places, and also records it differently than some of the Jewish episodes and traditions that happened after the book of Daniel was written. And that's where this article, written on a Jewish website from a Jewish scholarly viewpoint, brings out some things that I think are just very interesting. There are so many parallels here and so many good things to think about, and I want to try to present it in a way that lets you see that without me adding any commentary to it if I can. So we're just going to scroll down through this a little bit. Um, Hanukkah, of course, we're familiar with these menorahs that are lit for Hanukkah. You will notice that they are different than the ones that are normally used in the Jewish synagogue. They have extra candle to commemorate the days of the holiday. And so I'm just going to briefly go through this. I will attach a PDF of this document to my email that goes out to you with the link for the recording so that you can take a little time and read it yourself if you chose to do that. But the festival of Hanukkah centers around a group of Jewish zealots called the Maccabees. And at the time, Israel was always being conquered over and subjugated. And during this time, the Greek army had been in control, and the Maccabees, who were Jewish, rose up against them and defeated them. And how the legend goes, the story goes, when they went into the tabernacle, the temple, to relight the candle, they found that there was only a small amount of the special oil that was needed. It had to be sanctified, made specially, um, and be able to be blessed in that way to be able to put it in the menorah and light it. And so they only had 1 day's worth of this special oil. And so what happened was, as they put it in, the miracle that occurred was that the oil burned for more days. I believe it was for 8 days that the oil burned. And so here is where the um, holiday of Hanukkah comes in. That's the Jewish tradition that's taught. But what we notice here is that this is not a biblical holiday. It's not in the Hebrew scriptures, and here they point out that it's found nowhere in the Tanakh. Tanakh is an acronym that stands for the Torah, the is the T, which is the first five books of the Bible. Then the N stands for the Nevi'im, or the prophets. And then the last one is the Chet, or KHCH, which stands for Kevutim, or the writings. So this is when they say Tanakh, it's encompassing all of the scriptures that are part of what the Jewish people read today, pretty much our Old Testament in the Christian writings. So this festival of Hanukkah is not found anywhere in the Bible, and so it is a tradition. And here they bring out that these other festivals get lots of press time, lots of writing, but Hanukkah, here one rabbi even says we can't even remember what the holiday is all about. So it's interesting that this festival holiday has still found its way into Judaism. It's still celebrated today. If you live down in the Milwaukee area, you'll see menorahs around. You'll see special days where they celebrate the festival of Hanukkah, and it's a really big thing. It's a fun tradition for them. It's has a lot of merriment to it, a lot of different foods that go with it. This year happened to coincide right on Christmas, so it's again very, very interesting. But looking back at how this article points out that how Hanukkah started was with Matthias, the patriarch of the Maccabees, was a very ruthless person. He went in with his army and actually slaughtered here one of his own countrymen, a Jewish person, and goes through. And again, this is a very terrible time. There's murders taking place. There's the Grecian armies being defeated, those who were Jewish, who were along with them and aligning with the uh, Grecian army, were also killed by Mattathias the Maccabee, and they did liberate the Jews at this moment, but again, a lot of bloodshed took place and killing their own people. And so, again, this article brings this out that here some things happened. There was forced circumcision. The people who had not been serving God in the way that the Maccabees had anticipated were now forcing the Jewish people to serve God based upon the ways that the Maccabees felt observance had to be given. And it was very strange, very quite something, and it's not often talked about, and that's why this article is bringing it out. I thought it's kind of interesting that they were essentially terrorizing the people they were trying to liberate. And so here it points out that the Hanukkah story was not originally embraced because of the Jew on Jew violence. And then it compares that to, okay, here's how this group of Jewish people handled being oppressed, handled being persecuted. They fought back. They introduced violence. They had a rule of law based upon who conquered, and it was their interpretation of the observance that was required because they were in control. Here they're contrasting that to the book of Daniel. And it talks about a similar situation where the Jewish people are taken into captivity, but they don't fight back. They keep their culture, they keep their religion in the midst of a evil empire, in the midst of persecution, in the midst of this strange oppression that they didn't want to be in, but they still maintain their identity. And the book of Daniel talks about how Daniel and those involved in this were able to survive in this type of political environment. And so it's quite a contrast from the Maccabees and what was celebrated. And so here we see that they're also pointing out that it's not a popular book to read in Jewish culture because they like the book of Esther, which of course is where the Jews rise up and slaughter all their enemies as a model for survival in diaspora, which means the scattering. But here it says that the view presented in Daniel to stand back in the face of persecution and leave it to God is not something that's uh, preached much, I guess, if you will, or practiced much. And so this article is just very, very interesting about the two stands that were taken, what people embrace as far as what they celebrate, and that Hanukkah is still a tradition that's celebrated. And so I wanted to leave that with you because it sets the viewpoint of what's going on in Daniel and why they didn't fight back. They trusted God. They left it to God to deliver them. They were carried into captivity by the will of God, as we learn, and Daniel and his and the people there accepted it, took it as God's plan and purpose, and left it to God to work things out. And you'll see as we continue to go through, God's hand was very evident in the lives of the Jewish people during the time of Daniel. And we're going to read some fantastic stories that were recorded because of it. So, with that, the story goes on a little bit further. Hanukkah is referenced in the New Testament, and it's found in St. John chapter 10, verse 22. And it says, again, it's not spelled out very clearly, and most of us would have missed it, except for just a small notation here that it was Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. So even though it doesn't say Hanukkah, Hanukkah is the only feast in Judaism that is celebrated in winter. It's called the Feast of the Dedication here, which would be when the temple was reconsecrated, rededicated with the lighting of the menorah candles and dedicated back to God. So Jesus celebrates this feast. A lot of questions come to mind. Okay, Jesus was there. He walked in the temple. We see in verse 23. Um, we don't know how he participated in it. Was he in favor of it? We don't know. We think he maybe was because he was there. We find that he doesn't condemn it. He doesn't, throw over tables or kick people out and saying, why are you following this feast when it's not in the Bible? It's a man-made feast. It's based upon, you know, uh, premise that is based upon murder and armies and taking things into their own hands. And, you don't have any of that coming out here. Um, but what we do see is that verse 24, we wonder if the Jews who saw him there didn't make this connection because, Jesus is just walking into the temple and verse 24 comes up. The Jews said, "How long do you make us doubt? Tell us if you're the Christ." Now, of course, to a Jewish person back then, um, the Christ, the Messiah, was coming in a very different realm. They were looking for a conqueror. They were looking for someone who's going to restore um, the rightful position of Israel in power, restore full control of the temple. And so there's some similarities here that we can see of Jesus walking in the temple, the religious leaders around about him wondering if he's going in to, take control like they remember the Maccabees did because this was the feast of dedication. It was remembrance of what the Maccabees did. So just very similar here. And so they knew what was going on. And so here's where we see is Jesus maybe giving a little bit reference to the other train of thought as found in the book of Daniel, because Jesus answers them and said, I told you, you didn't believe me. And then he talks about the works that I'm doing. They bear witness of me. And then he says in verse 26, you're not hearing me. You don't hear my voice. You basically know nothing about what my mission is. And I think I can read into this. I don't know if you would agree, but Jesus is saying, let God do what God's got to do and let it be in God's timing. And they missed this timing. And just like the Maccabees maybe missed the timing and maybe did what they wanted to do in lieu of what God wanted to do, the comparison between how Daniel handled things is more along the lines of what Jesus is speaking of here, of hearing God's voice, of following them, of that they wouldn't perish. God would take care of them. neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. Just so many similarities to the book of Daniel and how God looked after them while they were in their captivity. And so I found this very, very interesting that they were not of the mindset of Jesus, but Jesus was more in the mindset of Daniel. And again, we suffer and are plagued by the same thing in our mindsets here. We want to take things in our own hands. We want to set up things according to the way we think they should be. And all the while, maybe God is just saying, hold on, hear my voice. Let me do the work. Let me work things out the way I need them to be worked out. And again, drawing parallels to just where we are in our world today with all the things that are happening, it's easy to want to let our own thoughts and our own desires, lead the way and follow what looks good to us. And I find myself challenged all the time saying, okay, well, what is God's plan? What are his prophecies? What's supposed to happen? Is this God's work? And trying to answer those questions in my mind and keep my heart from being fearful or being going in the wrong direction and just saying, no matter what happens, and no matter how things go, let me listen for God's voice and let me follow the way that He has foretold so that I don't take the wrong path and celebrate the wrong thing. So that was a little intro into the book of Daniel. Next week, we'll start back where we picked up again. And I just pray that God will bless you, give you strength, and may you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye bye.